I'm going to walk you through an understanding of using Dynamics CRM for building data-centric business applications. Before we do that, I want to define what a data-centric business application is. When I think about data-centric business applications, I think about an application that has a user interface that's primarily about data entry forms over relational data, people, places, and things. It has application-specific business logic around interacting with those people, places, and things. So it does things like data validation, complex logic and algorithms, calculations, etc. Modern business applications typically take some human-based process and attempts to automate that business process to gain efficiencies. Quite often, this business process automation involves some long-running process where, based on some timeout factor, if a certain set of information isn't filled out, you need to escalate to a manager or escalate to a special team of people. Once you've been able to capture that data, validate it, automate business processes around it, you need some level of business intelligence, right? Some insight into that data so that you can report on it, have high-level dashboards that tell you the status of things, what actions people who are using the application need to take, etc. Use familiar tools like Excel to slice and dice data and do further analytics on it. Modern business applications almost always have some level of granular role-based security where user X logs in and can see and do certain things. User Y logs in and can see and do a different set of things. Modern business applications need to expose some, if not all, of their core data, business logic, and business processes through a web services layer. Modern business applications need to be able to integrate with external systems. And last, but definitely not least, modern business applications need enterprise scalability so they can go from a few hundred users to thousands upon thousands of users. So I think of this definition as the litmus test for whether or not you should, at a minimum, think about Dynamics CRM as the technology to help you build these data-centric business applications. So let's take a look at a few of these kinds of applications. So here we are with your typical out-of-the-box Dynamics CRM implementation. It's very Salesforce automation focused. You see topics like sales and marketing and service. You have accounts and contacts. And this is the user experience for Dynamics CRM. It's fundamentally about high-level navigation areas, secondary level navigation, the main content area where you're seeing what we call a dashboard, and then the ribbon where you take action on things inside of the main content area. While Dynamics CRM has a wealth of out-of-the-box functionality around sales, marketing, and service, quite often these data-centric business applications don't use that out-of-the-box functionality. However, it is important to understand the core capabilities like case management, like marketing. A lot of times people don't think about marketing as something that they need, but it's really about customer, and in the government space, citizen, or even in a corporate space, employee outreach. But that's not really the focus of this video. The focus of this video is how do you build these data-centric applications using the facilities that Dynamics CRM provides in what people typically call the XRM framework. And I'll explain what XRM means as we move forward. So as an exercise in understanding what we mean by a data-centric business application or an XRM application, I'm going to switch over to a facilities management application. Now notice, this is sort of Dynamics CRM out of the box, customer relationship management, Salesforce automation. This is Dynamics CRM with different terminology, facility, fleet, asset, and high-level navigation, different record types, different icons, different data structures. but fundamentally it's the same user interface. If you know how to use this interface to navigate and interact with, track and report on this data, then you know how to use any data-centric business application built on top of Dynamics CRM. So for example, if I type in BOY, I know that I can use quick search to find records in the system. If I delete, I can say BO or B, I'll get everything that starts with a B. And once I know that anytime I have a grid of records, that I have this facility available to me. We'll look at another data-centric business application, or XRM app. And again, different terminology, issue resolution, vendor management, different record types and data structures. But again, if I know how to use charts, which can sit next to grids, I understand that I can use charts to filter information. So I can, for example, select which ones are pending approval, and it'll filter down to that subset. If I select new, it'll filter down to that subset. I can even do things like drill through, and I'll show you that later. Again, so I went from traditional CRM Salesforce automation to a facility management application, to a vendor management application, to a application for nonprofit organizations. And again, you see this consistent theme, different terminology, but it's all leveraging the core capabilities. In this case, I see activities, tasks that I have to do for the day, different metrics, etc. And in this case, you may not realize this, but existing record types in the system have been renamed from, for example, contact to constituents. If I come over here, I can select a constituent. If I want to create a new one of these, I can either come to the ribbon and create a new one, or I can come over here and create a new record. In this case, I get a new data entry form for this record. Again, I've got the same basic layout, main content area, navigable information, ribbon to take action. So I'll say, this is a test user. Notice when I click save on this, it's going to save the record. I also have jump to links inside of the form to jump to different sections on this form to fill out information. I can come over here and look to the left-hand side and see all the data related to this record. So you can kind of think of this as 360-degree navigation of your data. From a record, you can navigate to all related information for that particular record. In this case, I'll just go ahead and save and close. I could do things. In this case, they've augmented this to be able to add a picture. And so you get the general theme here is that once you understand one XRM or data-centric business application, you understand the fundamentals of navigating all of them. So now I'll take you through a little bit more of an end-to-end scenario, right? So we're taking a look at what's called the 311 accelerator. So if you go to 311.311center.codeplex.com, this is actually a solution accelerator for Dynamics CRM, which you can download yourself. And in fact, if you go to the download section here, there's not only a getting started guide, there's a demo script that you can walk through. I'll take you through an abridged version of this demo script, and you can actually download the documentation as well as the accelerator itself. So if you're not familiar with the 311 scenario, it's all about being able to file complaints around things like potholes and street lights being out and noise violations in your neighborhood, and being able to submit a case, if you will, to have that investigated and taken to resolution. So in this example, you'll notice the use of a CRM dashboard, which uses CRM charts to kind of bring high-level information into view. So the person who's working with 311 service request comes in for the day, and they say all their information at a very high-level glance. You can do things, for example, like expand these charts out to see more detail if there's too much information in the small space that you're in. You can even jump straight to the data based on the chart. And very similarly to what we saw before, you can come in here and start to filter the data just by interacting with the graphics. So I just want to see things that are urgent. Notice over here, we've got low, high, medium, urgent. If I select that, we filter all the way down to urgent. Right? I can then further refine. I can say, I want to execute, only want to see things that are in the in progress state. Boom, and I've got one record, right? And if I come up here to the ribbon, I can clear that filter. I can also, do basic sorting and additional filtering. Like, for example, I want to come in here and I want to filter based on, let's say, a custom filter, and I want to find information that contains the word noise in this row. And so if you're familiar with Excel, then you're already familiar with this kind of filtering and sorting metaphor. I can then take this subset of data, I can export it to Excel. Let's actually clear the filter out just so we've got something more meaningful. And let's just say, in this case, let's say we want to filter down to these that have a blank priority. And let's assume there's a little bit more data, and because of that, I want to be able to pivot on this and view it differently. So I want to pivot on service status. And I want to do that based on a bar chart. Let's go ahead and click OK. So now I can then further narrow down to the ones that are in the new phase. Then I can take this information and, for example, I can run a report on just this data if I have reports. Not the whole set of data, but just the subset of data that I've picked. I can, for example, export to Excel. And if I expect to export to Excel, I can either export as a static worksheet, which is really just a data dump in Excel where I can do further slicing and dicing, or I can implement this as a dynamic, or export this as a dynamic pivot table or dynamic worksheet, which will go back to Dynamics CRM and query for the data each time you open up the file. So I'll go ahead and close this out. If I look in the ribbon, I have this button called 311 call, and this is really a call script. This is what we call a dialogue in Dynamics CRM, which allows you to have this wizard-like experience which asks the end user a bunch of questions, and based on the answer to the question goes down different wizard or visual paths, and then ultimately does something within the system. And that's one way to get data into the system. Another way to get data into the system is to simply go into a certain record type and create a new record. And this is that familiar form which you saw earlier. Another way to get data into the system is through some external application, and that external application could be running on a mobile device, it could be a web application. It really doesn't matter because Dynamics CRM exposes its functionality through a web services layer so that you can essentially interact with that same data using any custom user interface that you want. So the people who work for the 311 center use the CRM user interface. Citizens, for example, might use this internet-facing portal to come in and, for example, submit a new service request. Okay, so let's say that I want to submit a pothole service request because I noticed that there was a pothole driving to work today. So I, as a citizen, come into pothole service request. I'd submit some tests, so some citizen. Of course, there's more to this 311 accelerator. I could sign in. I could, be a non-authenticated user and still submit information. I can provide some information about my email address, etc. Say where the pothole, roughly where the pothole is. I could put in some directions, for example. Say this is deep, it's 20 inches in diameter, and I hurt my neck. So I'll go ahead and click submit here. And what this is doing literally is from an ASP.NET MVC internet-facing web portal, submitting my pothole service request to Dynamics CRM through CRM's web services. And for example, I now have a tracking number. It's 100029. Right? If I come over here on the map, I can actually see it on the map now. And that happens to be it right there. Notice the priority set is set to urgent, and I'll explain why in a bit. I can come back over here, and let's say it's been a couple days and I want to know what the status is. I can just come in here and punch that number in and click go. In this case, it's going to again query Dynamics CRM for that data. And if I come over here and I refresh pothole service requests, and let's go ahead and arrange this by date, notice that there in fact is my pothole service request record sitting there inside of Dynamics CRM. So just an example of different mechanisms to get data into the system. And if I look over here on the map, notice that it's also there on the map, and I can do things like look at requests within the last 30 days. There's the one that I just submitted. Again, it's urgent. So why is it urgent? Well, if I come over to pothole service requests here, and I pull the record up, because I'm logged in as a user that has the right level of role-based security, you'll notice that I have the ability to look at workflow executions. So workflows in Dynamics CRM are a mechanism of automating business processes. And so if I open this up, notice that this workflow succeeded, and I can actually look at the actual code execution, if you will, of the workflow. So I'll click on that link. What you'll notice is a workflow is simply what I consider a use case based definition, right? It's textual. It's, if this, then that kind of logic based on data in the system. So in this case, if the pothole service request was set to injury, automatically set as priority to urgent. Otherwise, if it's between a certain diameter, set it to high. Otherwise, if it has a depth over 3 inches, then set it to medium. Otherwise, set it to low, right? And that's business logic that you can implement without having to be a developer. And this is one of those many areas where Dynamics CRM allows you to build these data-centric business applications without having to write code. So that's just a little bit of a peek into business logic. But you've seen forms over data entry. You've seen the basic navigation of data, etc. Another thing that I want to show you is something called Advanced Find. Advanced Find is again, once you've built one of these applications, you have access to Advanced Find. And Advanced Find is essentially an ad hoc query tool. So notice I can come in here and I can take one of these existing queries based on something we call a view. And a view is nothing more than a saved query. And I can create my own query. So I can say, you know what? I also want to find out, I only want the ones whose priority equals, let's say, urgent and high. I'll click OK. I can see my results right there. Okay, so then I can come in here and I can actually save this. So for example, I'll say, select Save As. Urgent / high. I'll click OK. So this is now saved. I can close this out. And now notice that in my views dropdown, I have a view that I've saved. And so I can go ahead and click this, and that's that query that I saved on my own. So as a power user who has the ability to save advanced finds, I can not only use an ad hoc query tool to find the data that I'm looking for, in addition to all the other facilities we have for narrowing data down by graphing and filtering and all that stuff, but I can also answer my own questions of the data. And I can even run reports, contextual reports, right from within this data. And if I have written the report correctly, I can actually just report on the subset of data that is based on this view. So you can write a report once and have it report on different subsets of data based on views. Okay, so hopefully you've got a good sense of what the Dynamics CRM user experience is like and how it's applicable to generic data-centric business application scenarios. And what I want to do is just reiterate that definition of a data-centric business application. user interface that's primarily data entry forms over relational data, people, places, and things. Business logic, we didn't see a whole lot of that just yet, but we'll get there. Business process automation, we saw a little bit of that with CRM workflow. Business intelligence through reporting, dashboards, exporting to Excel, etc. Granular role-based security, haven't seen that in great detail yet, but we will. We saw a scenario where an internet-facing portal was communicating to Dynamics CRM, both reading data from and providing data to Dynamics CRM through Dynamics CRM's web services. These data-centric business applications need to integrate with external systems. Haven't seen a whole lot of that yet, but we'll get into that. And then finally, they need to have enterprise scalability. And this is something we won't go into in great detail because this is really just a primer in this scenario, but Dynamics CRM has a scale-out architecture which allows you to go from one server to, say, 10 servers based on the characteristics and load of your application, the number of users you have, etc. So now that you understand what I mean by a data-centric business application, and you've gotten a taste of these kinds of applications in action, hopefully you have enough of a picture as to how these different kinds of what we call extended CRM applications or XRM applications can be built. How you can build an asset management system, a human resources management system, a patient relationship management system, property management, etc. And since I spend all my time in the federal, state, and local government, healthcare, and education space, some examples of where we see this technology being applied are things like offender management, field inspection management, patient relationship management, you name general case management, investigation management. Anytime you have this profile of an application where you need to manage people, places, and things, have business logic, business processes, and business intelligence, i.e. insight into the data through reporting, dashboarding, analysis, etc. And these are just a few examples of the many places where various industry and vertical leaders have built solutions on top of Dynamics CRM in this extended CRM fashion.